Hello, welcome to another Nacelle Partner Office Hours. My name is Austin Rutherford. I'm the Senior Vice President of Customer Experience here at Nacelle. Really excited to make it through a great week. We just had our company out at NRF, which was the big retail show in New York. Really excited to share some of the information with you. Have a great session planned here. So first up, we're going to give some partner updates. I'm going to hand over to my partner, Brian Jambor, who everyone knows. And then we're going to have Lincoln Cross give an update, really a walkthrough, a tech talk on our Lighthouse capabilities and have some really great knowledge there. And we've been using Lighthouse and Speedcurve, those types of technologies to help with our merchants for a while. Really important, good information there. And then at the end, we'll have an open Q&A. But we encourage everyone along the way to post questions in the general Nacelle Partner Slack channel. If you haven't been there, it's a great place where you can see questions during the session as well as even offline. And then during this live session, you can actually even post it within the YouTube comments, and we'll be monitoring those as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Brian Jambor.
Thanks, Austin. Appreciate that. And as Austin was saying, our partner community, if you aren't on there yet in Slack, you can join by visiting nacellepartners.slack.com. That's where, as Austin said, you can ask questions as part of this session. And you can also ask questions to the general Nacelle team through that community. So Austin mentioned NRF. We were at NRF this past week, and we're really excited to announce at NRF out-of-the-box connectivity. OOTB stands for out of the box. Out-of-the-box connectivity is now offered for all platforms that want to connect into Nacelle. So what does that mean? That means that if you have a client that is on Salesforce Commerce Cloud or Magento or BigCommerce or Commerce Tools or Shopify, whatever commerce platform they are using, they can connect that into Nacelle and then have Nacelle power the PWA that's built on top of Nacelle. So if you have additional questions around out-of-the-box connectivity, feel free to reach out to your partner manager and they can provide you with more information. We also want to announce a partner incentive that we've been running through the end of this month, through January 31st. Nacelle will pay for part of your client's headless implementation. So if you have a client that's considering going headless, decoupling that back end from that front end, Nacelle will help pay for that front end storefront, that PWA implementation, part of it, not in full, but part of it. Ask your partner manager for more details. They'll let you know if your client qualifies and what that amount could be. And then last, but certainly not least, we want to give a huge shout out to Nathan and the SiteSource team in becoming Nacelle's very first certified partner. The SiteSource team went through the beta partner portal that we have, where we have a certification course all about how to utilize Nacelle. They flew through that course and passed it with flying colors, and have just done a great job really honing their Nacelle skills in terms of how Nacelle is configured with other platforms. And so I want to congratulate again Nathan and the SiteSource team being Nacelle's first certified partner. If you visit our partner directory, our agency partner directory, you will see SiteSource as the #1 listing now in that directory, because the directory sorts by certified partners first and then alphabetically based on the partner name. And so SiteSource has a very prime real estate position due to them committing to that certification. So just want to really give a big shout out to Nathan and the team and tell them how much we appreciate them. With that, we're going to transition to our tech talk. And with us, we have Lincoln Cross, who Austin mentioned earlier. Lincoln is a phenomenal resource here at Nacelle. He has a lot of great information around using Speedcurve to measure PWA performance. And with that, we'll turn the floor over to Lincoln so he can provide us with that information.
Excellent. Thank you for that intro, Brian. Hey, team, thanks for joining us today. As Austin alluded to, today we'll be covering Speedcurve. Previously, in a prior partner tech talk, you may remember we covered Lighthouse specifically, that Google Performance Analyzer. If you haven't seen that talk, feel free to go to our YouTube Partner Office Hours channel, brush up on your Lighthouse knowledge. But without further ado, let's dive into Speedcurve. Today we'll be covering what is Speedcurve, And then more generally, what are performance metrics? It's a very loose term that gets bandied about on the forums and on the websites. Where does Nacelle fit in? And then finally, what is a Speedcurve report? And we'll have kind of a live demo of what I would generally present to one of my implementation projects. All right, so Speedcurve is a third-party tool that Nacelle uses, and it's a way to collect performance data within a controlled environment with predefined device and network settings. This is really exciting because one of the disadvantages of using Google Lighthouse is that you can simulate either a desktop or a mobile experience, but it's still going to be somewhat dependent upon your computer. And that means your network connection, your computer's processing abilities, how many tabs you have up, and how much you're already utilizing those resources of your computer. So Speedcurve kind of takes the mystery out of that and says we're going to test on a very specific device, say an iPhone 10. So we have a predefined screen size. We're hitting a mobile site experience. And then finally, we'll test it on a 4G, a typical 4G network connection. So this gives you a really good idea of what your typical mobile user, which now comprises over 50% of your web traffic for an average e-com site, what a typical mobile user will encounter when they hit your website for the first time. And then additionally, Speedcurve allows you to test different URLs on a regular basis. So you could set up testing for your homepage, a PDP, a product description page, maybe even a blog page if you have high blog traffic. And you can test that every day so that Speedcurve will generate in a very nice chart how you're performing day over day. If you push a code change that's significant, you can see how that impacted specifically for that day. So it's a really useful tool that we like to use to monitor the health of our implementations. So like I said before, it measures performance metrics. And with Lighthouse, Speedcurve actually captures Lighthouse metrics. So that means it's pulling core web vitals like largest contentful paint, cumulative layout shift, etc. And then it's also pulling the weighted metrics that Lighthouse uses, like speed index, first contentful paint, total blocking time, things that aren't a part of the core web vitals, but still go into Google's ranking. So Google, when you pull a Lighthouse report, you're only getting a single point in time. But with Speedcurve, like I mentioned before, you're testing it every day and you create a chart of your performance. And then in addition to those Lighthouse metrics, it pulls everything else. So Speedcurve is a very comprehensive testing suite, and it's testing JavaScript. That could be third-party scripts. What's the impact of loading a third-party module like Klaviyo or Yapo? It tests your website size. So how big is your website or the page that you're hitting? It can break that up by content type, which is really useful. Say you have a 7 megabyte homepage and you're like, oh my gosh, why is my homepage so big? Speedcurve will break that down and we can include a screenshot that says, oh, look, you have 5 megabytes of image content. So maybe we need to look at compressing your hero banner, something like that. And then it also does CPU load and a variety of other things. So very comprehensive, very helpful. Where does Nacelle fit in? So Speedcurve is a third-party tool, tests a bunch of things. We pay for it so that we can look at our implementations and monitor them. But when it comes to sharing that information with our partners, we have very specific Speedcurve reports that we've created that we present to our agencies or our merchants at every milestone. So what this means is that Nacelle will continually be checking. Sometimes it's once you have everything connected for the first time and you have index data displaying to a PDP. This could be after you've completed all of your e-com pages. So you have PDPs, PLPs, your home page, maybe a deals page or something. We can run a Speedcurve test against all of that. And then of course, at the end of the project, once the build is complete, but before you go live, we can run another Speedcurve report as well. These Speedcurve reports that we generate compare your existing Shopify site against your headless build, and you'll see what that looks like later. These metrics are compared over time since we're generating them regularly, and we also include definitions for non-technical users. these are consistent metrics that you're seeing from the beginning to the end of the project. A merchant team that's non-technical, like say it's an agency implementation, and you have a merchant team that's getting periodic demos, maybe even a live link that they can click through of the website. Sure, they're going to have some perception of speed based on clicking around. Maybe they'll run a lighthouse report, but again, those are slightly inconsistent. So having a source of truth to say, we've been reviewing the site from conception to launch, and these are solid metrics that we can rely on when we're looking at performance numbers. And with Nacelle, our partnerships don't stop when the website goes live. We continue to support our partners throughout the life of their website. So what that means is that after your website goes live, we'll hand it off from the implementation team, which I'm an implementation manager. That's my section of the project. We'll hand it off to a customer success manager who's going to be your Nacelle point of contact from that time forward. And they'll continue to run Speedcurve tests and do code audits as well, either on a monthly, every other month basis, or whenever you push significant code or are looking at adding new features. Our goal is to be here to support you, and Speedcurve and our code audits are just one way that we're able to do that. All right, so with that, I'll show you what a Speedcurve report looks like, and we'll talk through it. All right, so this is a real Speedcurve report that I've actually just called demo for the sake of anonymity, and I've altered a couple numbers just so we can tell a story. So in the very top section, the first yellow chunk of total size, speed index, all the way down to time to interactive, these are what I picked out as kind of general indicators of user experience. On the left side, we have the Shopify Live column, that blue column, and these are numbers that I pulled from a Shopify site. And then on the right, the purple column, we have headless. When you use Vercel or any other mainstream CDN hosting platform, typically you'll get deploy links. So every time you make a code change and you push that to your Vercel production, you actually get a dedicated link for that. So that's one reason that I love Vercel, is it lets you see in real time what your website changes look like on the front end. So for headless, I've grabbed the latest production deploy of the PWA. And then on the far right column, the percent change, I've calculated the percentage between those two values, and then I've colored them green, yellow, or red, depending on if they're looking good or if they've improved. Yellow means it stayed the same, and then red is could improve or it decreased. So let's look at the story that these metrics tell. In the entire top half, we've got green metrics. You'll notice that the start render time, which is in seconds, went from 0.9 seconds to 1 second. This means that the first item of content, this could be a picture, this could be a text block, is shown on the screen to your end user in about 1 second time. Even though that metric increased, which means it's longer for that piece of content to display, I'm not too concerned about that because 1 second is very fast. If a user clicks on your link and 1 second later they've got a piece of content painted, great. So I counted that as green, even though technically it's kind of moved up a little bit, because I don't think that's an area for concern. Same deal with speed index. 1.26 on their Shopify site is a great score. So 1.3 is a 4% change. I don't think there's a lot of room for improvement there, and we don't want to waste too much developer resources trying to focus on something that's only going to net fractions of a second, unless it's already a terrible score. But in this case, it's a good score. Everything else, huge improvements. The size went down. Third-party tasks, third-party JavaScript went down. All good there. Moving into core web vitals, we have a red largest contentful paint. It went from 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Now, on a second tab of this report, which I would share with my merchants or agencies, I include definitions and ideal ranges. So with largest contentful paint, if a merchant or agency was to click on definitions, they would see that you want to be 0 to 2.5 on largest contentful paint. Google calls that a green. So previously they were green at 2 seconds, and then now at 3 seconds, they're in the yellow. Not ideal. So I tag that as red because we need to get that number down. There's a lot of reasons that largest contentful paint could be longer, which we talked about in our Lighthouse presentation on YouTube. The primary reason for that is that it's being served in an unoptimized format. Could be just a JPEG that you're pulling from Shopify that's not compressed. So using something like a Nuxt image tag to serve that image in a WebP format, or a format, the latest format that the browser hosts or supports, would improve that time immensely. So I would flag that for our merchant or agency to say, take a look at your hero banner on this homepage. Cumulative layout shift is perfect at 0. And then JavaScript total blocking time, which means the amount of time the main thread is being blocked, is very low as well. So all good there. Moving down into the Lighthouse scores, we see that all the Lighthouse scores have improved, which is great. Going from 30 to 50 is a huge jump. So that's fantastic. The only score that's cause for concern here is the Lighthouse accessibility score, and that's why I flagged it as yellow. It drops from 90 to 77. This will impact your search engine optimization or how Google's ranking your website. But the good news is Google is telling you how to improve these scores. They want you to have a good website. So same deal. If a merchant or agency went to the definitions tab of this document that I share with them, they would see I have a link included for Lighthouse recommendations that Google provides. So that would take them to a section where they could click on accessibility, and they would see, oh, there's all these things I can do to get that 77 back up to a 90, maybe even to 100. The same deal goes for PWA. They jumped from a 40 to a 70 approximately, which is great. But there's a couple of things they could do based on Google's recommendations to get that number up higher. I really like these reports because for technical and non-technical users, it demystifies the performance metrics. There's not this ambiguous, are my users having a hard time because the site is slow? Are they having a hard time because when they click on something, it doesn't respond right away? This takes the mystery out of that and breaks up each performance item into a very specific location, and allows an experienced developer, or even a non-experienced developer, if they're comfortable reading Google Docs, to get into the code, execute some best practices, and team up with one of our solution architects who can help guide them on those best practices and point out specific lines of code where they could improve. So that is everything that I had to share about Speedcurve and how we use it. At this time, I'd like to open the floor up to a Q&A, which we'll bring back Brian for.
Hey, thanks, Lincoln. Appreciate that, and really appreciate the time you took to give us an in-depth demo of Speedcurve and have a greater understanding of what each of those definitions mean and what's good or not so good, and how people can improve that. So we have, it looks like, a couple of questions here that came in. If anybody else has additional questions, feel free to post those in the general Nicelle Partner Slack channel or in the comments of YouTube, and we're happy to answer those as well. The first one that came in was, do I need to pay for my own third-party testing tool if Nicelle uses Speedcurve?
That's a good question. It may seem at first glance that Nicelle is supplying Speedcurve as a tool for you to use for free, and that is not the case. We are using Speedcurve internally to generate these reports that we share with you at specific milestones. So what I would recommend, if performance is something you're really focused on and really committed to, I would get a third-party testing tool yourself. It could be Speedcurve, it could be another one. There's a variety out there, whichever one suits your needs. So that way you can generate reports for your stakeholders on the fly. If you're an agency, this ends up going even further because you're going to be using this for all of your sites. So just like we're trying to help you, you'll be able to help your stakeholders by having your own third-party tool.
Fantastic. Thanks for that. Looks like Speedcurve, from a cost standpoint, for those of you that are curious, they have pricing on their website. It starts at $114 a month. So not a huge expense. You could probably bake that into one of the first projects you do. Next question. Do I need a third-party tool if I regularly check Lighthouse? Oh, that's interesting. So if they regularly check Lighthouse, Lincoln, do they need a third-party tool like Speedcurve as well? Or what are your thoughts there?
I would say that Lighthouse is a really solid start, a really good beginning. So if you're just getting into third-party metrics, Lighthouse is a great place to start, but it doesn't provide the consistency that Speedcurve provides. It doesn't give you a way to view your performance over time like Speedcurve does. And it's also not automated out of the gate. You can code it to be automated, but Speedcurve, you set it up, you do it once, and then you know that you're getting metrics over time as long as you're paying for it. So I would recommend having Speedcurve in addition to Lighthouse.
Awesome. Appreciate that distinction. The next one, was there a reason you chose to use Speedcurve instead of another tool? You mentioned earlier there's a lot of tools out there, that Speedcurve isn't the only one. Was there a reason why we chose Speedcurve instead of anything else specifically?
Yeah, so I think we chose Speedcurve because of the way that it displays the information. I really like the ease with which you can set up testing environments. So I've set up an iPhone 10 environment, and that's what these metrics that I showed you earlier today were based on. But if the majority of your users are iPad users, or if you have kind of an older demographic that's using primarily desktop but on a slower internet connection, these are all things that you can simulate. So it gives you a really good idea of what your user base is experiencing. So that, I think that's why we chose Speedcurve, but that's not to belittle any of the other third-party testing platforms. I'm sure they're all great for whatever they're trying to achieve.
Fantastic. And then next one, how often do you perform? I think we alluded to this a little bit actually earlier, but I'll ask, and somebody asked, how often do you perform Speedcurve tests?
Yeah, so Speedcurve's pricing model is based on how many tests you run, which makes sense. It's a consumption model. So we chose to run tests for our merchants once a day. I think that is enough to get a sense of how your website is performing. That being said, if you weren't changing your code base very frequently, you could have a custom Speedcurve pricing plan where you get to choose the number of tests that you want to run. So that might save you some costs if, like for example, we don't use real user metrics. In the basic Speedcurve plan, they include real user metrics as part of something you can use, and they charge you for that. So we set up a custom pricing plan. We don't use real user metrics, and that saves us some money. So if you were in a site that didn't have a lot of code changes happening every day, you might only need to test it once a week, and that would save you some costs. So all up to you and how you're pushing code.
That's a great money-saving tip. Thanks for that. Appreciate that. Though that looks like those are all the questions that we have for today. So again, Lincoln, thank you so much for presenting. Appreciate your time. And with that, we'll turn the time back to Austin.
Hey, thanks, Brian. And great job, Lincoln. I always learn a lot. Even if I saw the slides before, I always learn a lot listening to you. And so thank you very much.
Yeah.
Just a quick reminder here. So if you're a Google searcher like me, it's very simple to find any of this content. If you open up a web browser and type in Nacelle Partners YouTube, boom, first hit comes up here is Nacelle Partners page, and you can see any of the prior content that have been shared as a part of the Nacelle office hours. And then also I would recommend that you click this button, subscribe. So is there any additional content that's published up there, you get notified, and just a great place. It's continuing to grow. So here we have last week's CEO vision presentation from Brian Anderson. You can see more about Lighthouse that Lincoln talked about. So lots of great things. So with that, thank you again for joining, and we look forward to joining at the next one. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.